Set in Spain, the story begins by showing a man and husband named Manuel, who is visiting his sister's house, not alone. Manuel was accompanied by his wife Julia, and looked very happy to be able to play with his little nephew.
Buenas noches.
Como tú. Pero ¿cómo que? A la cama antes de que vuelva tu madre.
On the way home, Julia discussed the matter of children. After 2 years of marriage, they had not had children because Manuel continued to refuse to have children on the grounds that he was still busy with his work. Hearing this, Julia became annoyed, which led to an argument, so that...
¿Estás bien?
One year later, Manuel now lives alone after his wife Julia died in an accident that night during that 1 year. A rumor emerged regarding a new virus that was widely discussed. This virus is more dangerous than the COVID-19 virus, and from the information circulating, someone who is infected with the virus will become uncontrollable. After becoming unemployed like me, Manuel intended to sell his ship to someone else in order to make a living. It was quite hard for Manuel to let it go, because the ship had many memories with his wife Julia, and coincidentally, the buyer was not very interested in the old ship.
¿Facturas?
Hola.
¿Dónde está?
After failing to sell the ship, Manuel went to the supermarket, which happened to be crowded with visitors that day because of the news about a new virus that had the potential to result in restrictions on activities. After a little shopping, Manuel immediately returned home and only lived with his beloved cat.
De las Islas Baleares nos ha transmitido que no se ha registrado. Estas noticias nos dicen que ahora mismo estamos conteniendo la enfermedad.
Not long after, Manuel received a call from his older sister, who wanted to discuss the new virus, which she said was increasingly disturbing. It is predicted that there will be a quarantine that will prevent everyone from leaving the house and doing activities. The older brother also plans to go to an island called Canary Island, which is believed to be the safest place so far, and Manuel is asked to go with him for the safety of both of them.
No puedo.
Pues, esta noche.
Yo sabía que no, que hoy voy a estar bien.
The next morning, Manuel saw all the neighbors packing and planning to go out of town. It seemed like this virus was really real, and everyone was scared, so Manuel immediately accelerated her car to the airport, so she could immediately leave for the Canary Islands with her older sister.
Drásticamente el periodo de incubación a apenas unos TSJ que está poniendo en jaque a las autoridades europeas, siendo por el contacto sanguíneo, especialmente a causa de aparición de los síntomas más severos. Al parecer, el y mordeduras subcutáneas, descartando...
Upon arrival at the airport, Manuel had to wait around 2 hours to depart, where while passengers were queuing in front of the gate, suddenly all flights were cancelled, followed by an emergency warning from the government urging everyone not to travel anywhere. Instead of returning home quickly, Manuel was stuck in an incredibly long traffic jam. So instead of wasting time on the road, Manuel and everyone else chose to walk to their respective homes.
Turbios, hay que sumar una última hora, la de un grupo.
Arriving at Manuel's housing complex, he was immediately greeted by a crowd showing officers bringing in a close neighbor who was suspected of being infected with the virus. Where for the first time we saw that the virus in question could actually turn a person into a figure similar to a zombie. Not knowing what to do, Manuel chose to go straight into the house and sleep with nightmares about the accident that night. The next morning, Manuel received a call from her older sister, who told her that the air routes had been closed as well as land routes, so the only safest way for now was to stay at home, because her older sister's husband had a helicopter Manal would be picked up by helicopter. But for now, the older sister can't be sure because she has to look at the situation and conditions first. After making the call, Manal idly scrolled through TikTok to see the latest conditions. It was true that his brother said that there was massive chaos out there. As a result of people not accepting the rules limiting outside activities, Manal also saw a video showing how to avoid zombie attacks. And yes, a second emergency warning appeared indicating that the situation was becoming increasingly critical. Manal immediately went to the supermarket with the intention of buying supplies, but it turned out yes, there was nothing left except cat food and the like, so Manal quickly went to another shop and managed to get some of the remaining food. Whereas Manal was about to go home, an injured policeman appeared and immediately locked himself in the shop, and suddenly seeing an officer being attacked, Manal quickly took a hard object to help, but just as explained in the news, the virus was transmitted through the bite of the officer, who locked himself in the shop and slowly turned into a zombie, followed by the officer outside, who told Manal to leave this place as soon as possible. With the fact that the situation was getting more and more chaotic, Manal began to equip his house with various preparations such as sharp fences and CCTV cameras at the front of his house, which, even though this had not proven effective, at least he showed the desire to survive.
Desde el centro temporal de mando de la Graciosa, en cada agencia.
Long story short, night fell. One by one the civilians were evacuated to be taken to a safe zone, but the older brother immediately sent a message to Manal not to believe it, because more people in the same place would actually increase the risk of danger. Not long after, the officers started knocking on the front door of his house. Manal could only remain silent, but not his pet cat, which kept making noises.
¡Es una orden! ¡No podemos perder más tiempo! Esto no se abre. Vámonos.
1 week after everyone was evacuated to the safe zone, Manal became the only person left in this housing complex. He used solar panels to keep several things in the house powered, but the problem was that the signal was no longer there, which made Manal unable to contact his older sister. Armed with a fishing weapon and several handmade equipment, Manal went through one house after another to look for leftovers until he accidentally met a grandmother who also chose to stay in her house.
No tengo nada.
After getting to know each other, Manal and the grandmother started working together to look for food. The grandmother, who was familiar with all the neighbors, knew very well which house and who usually stored food in large quantities, so Manal only had to visit the house to make sure. Manal couldn't find much food, although everything was rotten and unfit to eat, but some of it was something they could drink, namely alcohol. And the most surprising thing was that Manal found a motorbike that was still functioning well and would definitely be very helpful in his search activities. Food. That night, with the leftovers that Manal found, He and the grandmother ate dinner together as if nothing had happened to keep their minds healthy. They explored the grandmother, who apparently had been deliberately abandoned by her children because she was considered a burden. Because she couldn't walk, this made Manel sympathize and promise not to do the same thing as his children did. Late at night, Manel was awakened by a walkie-talkie from her grandmother, who told her about a radio broadcast that sent a message to the survivors to go to Canary Island, exactly as she said, saying that Canary Island was the only safest place so far. Assuming her older sister would be there by now, Manel thought about taking her parents' boat to the Canary Islands, taking her grandmother with her.
Lo vamos a conseguir, Gabriela.
The next morning, Manel immediately packed up to go to the pier, but when she was going to pick up her grandmother, Manel was shocked when she had died due to suicide from the message she left. Her grandmother did it on purpose, because she didn't want to burden anyone. Just had a friend in a situation like this, Manel again had to feel lost, like when Julia left him, when Manel was walking outside while thinking hard, suddenly. Yes, for the first time Manel managed to kill a zombie by shooting it right in the head. This moment also became new knowledge for him to kill zombies quickly, so the head or brain was the main target.
Creo que ya no os puedo esperar más.
Unable to waste any more time, Manel plans to continue going to the pier, bringing the only friend he has left, namely his beloved cat, and using a motorbike as his main vehicle. And if Manel thought that by using a motorbike he could avoid zombies, he was wrong, because when Manel was passing through the forest, suddenly dozens of zombies appeared and chased him, where Manel actually entered the camping area, where more and more zombies started running after him. And yes, Manel fell off the motorbike after hitting a pile of corpses. Unfortunately, the motorbike couldn't be used anymore, so Manel was forced to run from the zombies. When he arrived at the pier, all the boats were not there, including his. After walking around, Manel finally found a boat whose owner had left it and tried to swim there to make sure. Yes, Manel was shocked by a toddler who had become a zombie. Because his boat couldn't be started, Manel used a small boat to cross to another pier, hoping to find a boat that was still suitable for use.
Hola, hermana. Teníais razón en desconfiar de los puntos seguros.
Just as it was starting to get dark, the boat suddenly stopped after the engine propeller caught on something. Not long after, a boat appeared containing survivors who were on patrol. They rescued Manel and immediately took him to the main boat. Arriving at the main boat, Manel immediately met a man named Victor, who was the only person who could speak Spanish. Manel was also known to the boat captain, named Yushikov. They were all survivors from Ukraine who were known to be building shelters and traveling in groups with the aim is to gather members to build an army.
¿Tú qué hacías en la ría?
He venido siguiendo el mensaje de radio.
When asked what his job was, Manel answered that he was an engineer. This was immediately responded well by Captain Yushikov, who immediately left him so he could rest immediately. While taking Manel to his room, Victor also talked a little about himself. Who as a helicopter pilot, his life was very normal until his wife was declared infected with the virus. That's where everything became chaotic, until finally Victor met the captain who kindly saved him. Just late at night, when he couldn't sleep, Manel accidentally saw several other survivors who had just arrived and needed help. Thank goodness there were still other people who could survive, so Manel felt like he wasn't alone anymore living in this chaotic place. The next morning at breakfast, Manel met Victor to ask about the survivors who had just arrived last night. Victor firmly said that no other survivors besides himself had been found, so Manel began to have a bad feeling about everyone on this boat. As a native of this place, Manel was asked by the captain to show him the location of important places such as car factories, weapons shops, and so on, so that Manel's suspicions about Captain Yushikov were even stronger. Perhaps he was planning something for his own benefit. Still curious about where last night's survivors went, Manel expressed his suspicions about the captain having hidden intentions due to the fact that Victor also didn't seem happy to be here. Manel also told him about a helicopter that was in one of the hospitals and invited Victor to go to the Canary Islands together.
¿Quieres seguir con vida?
Because Victor refused his invitation this afternoon, Manel decided to just leave this boat. Whereas he was about to leave in silence, Manel accidentally heard a scream from one of the rooms, which turned out to be Yes, apparently these were the survivors that Manel had seen last night. I don't know what the captain would do to them, but when Manel managed to release one of them, one of the captain's men appeared and immediately pointed a gun at him. Yes, Victor managed to save Manel, including agreeing to go to Canary Island, where they managed to escape even though they were shot at by the captain and all his crew. Arriving at the Manel mainland, he took Victor, who had been shot, to a place full of abandoned cars. When he found a zombie trapped in a Manel car, immediately shot him and took over the car.
Hay un helipuerto en un hospital muy cerca de aquí.
On the way to the hospital where there is a helicopter, Victor finally tells about the figure of Captain Yushikov, who is not a good person at all. He only saves people who he considers useful and can contribute to his group, while people who are deemed to not have the captain's skills and abilities will lock him up, made a sacrifice for hungry zombies. When he arrived at the hospital, Manel was again surprised by several zombies who came to attack, where Manel immediately took Victor's firearm and they both quickly entered the hospital, so they could go to the roof where the helicopter was parked, but they still faced the same challenge. Namely, zombies. Manel again had to survive while protecting Victor, who was dying, until the end. Yes, it turns out there are 2 women and children who are still surviving by locking themselves up in a closed room, so that for the time being Manel is forced to survive temporarily until the situation becomes conducive again.
Le hemos sacado la bala. Tiene un poco de fiebre.
And thankfully, there is a signal here that allows Manal to open the message from her older sister. In one of the videos sent, the older sister admits that she has arrived at the Canary Islands. While crying, the older sister apologizes for not being able to fulfill her promise to pick up Manal because the situation is really not supportive. Not long after, the captain and his men appeared who managed to track the two of them. So there was no time left, but to quickly get out of this place, they slowly left the room and managed to reach the top floor where the helicopter was.
Un último esfuerzo.
The problem is that outside the door there are lots of zombies who definitely won't let them reach the helicopter. Manal, who remembered one of the videos he had watched, immediately made a protective shield using some of the hospital trolleys that were there. Finally, after going through quite a tiring tension, Manal and his friends managed to reach the helicopter, where Victor, who needed time to start the helicopter, was forced to double the Manal again to keep the zombies from entering the helicopter runway. Unfortunately, the captain seemed to have already arrived there and entered the landing through the side door, so there was no other choice. Manal was forced to open the entrance to the zombies and let them all attack the captain and his group. In the end, Manal and his friends managed to fly away from that place. Right on the way to Canary Island, the older brother suddenly contacted Manal to tell him about the current condition of Canary Island, which turned out to be infected, and Manal was asked not to come there.
Manel, no vengas a Canarias, no vengas, por favor, no vengas a Canarias.
Finished. The moral message we can take from this film is that sometimes things don't go according to our wishes. What you need to do is pray and try again. If reality doesn't match your expectations, believe that God knows better what is best for your life. I Wing, as the owner of this channel, would like to thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Thank you.